Hi, guys. I'm Dr. John Sanders, family medicine physician with the Voyage Clinics podcast. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I have one of my favorite guests, Dr. Mark Mauzy, with me. He's a PhD marriage and family therapy fella, and he's just a very bright guy, smarter than me in a lot of ways. I really like him. He just came off a construction job, so he's got awesome construction vibes today. What's the marriage and family therapist doing construction? Well, that's a whole nother story. But today we're going to talk about something really special, really important to me. We're going to talk about the art of friendship. And I think that friendship has been lost a little bit in our society. We've been in as a world, not just a community, not just an area of the United States, but as a world, we have been kind of driven wedges between connection and friendship. And I think COVID only made it worse, right? So we were socially distancing, we were socially disconnecting very deliberately, and a lot of the things that happened under that were just kind of atrocities, and they led to a lot of really negative social things. I'm a family physician. I have my own clinic, the Voyage Clinics, in fact, and I see a lot of adolescents, and the impact that had on our adolescent population was profound. Dr. Mauzy and I, we co-managed a adolescent fellow together, him doing some of the coaching piece and me doing the family physician piece. And he, from COVID, lost connection to a group of his friends. And then that led to some feelings of regret and remorse. And he didn't feel like he could reconnect with them afterwards. They were put back into a school environment with masks on. That gave him a little bit of trepidation with that connection as well. And then it led him to a course of, sadly, depression and suicidality. He's totally safe right now, but we've seen teenage suicide rates increase remarkably from all of those things. And so our mission in the Voyage Clinics podcast is to bring health and happiness to our communities, and I think this is a big piece of it. So Mark and I wanted to nerd out for a little bit about love, connection, and reestablishing, a sense of friendships with those around us and working on some of those fundamentals. So Mark, welcome. Thank you. Thanks again for coming.
Yeah, it's always good to be here.
I wanted to share a brief story about friendship that I recently had. My father passed away about a week and a half ago. He was suffering for a long time, and it was very expected. And he's just a good old boy. And he had a really good friend. And my dad, every chance he got, he was hunting, fishing. He was outside. Mm-hmm. And he made friends with this guy on a hunting trip. And he's like this 90-year-old Marine guy. My dad was old too. He's about 82 when he passed away. And they became good buddies. And this Marine, he got up and spoke at my dad's funeral last weekend. And he was so emotional. And he said, Sam and I were just real close. As close as two people can be. He said, after that hunting trip, he adopted me. And that's touching for me because he adopted me when I was a young boy. And then I listened to him tell the stories of how every weekend we were out hunting and fishing. And he said, when I fell and I hurt myself, he came over every day and cared for me. And when he fell and hurt himself, because old guys fall a lot, turns out, I came over and helped him every day. And then he says, we were just so damn close. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, what a beautiful tribute, but also what a beautiful just example of real love and friendship. And so I want to talk about friendship, what it has, what effect it has health-wise on us. And then I want to talk about, like, how do we get there? How do we get better at this skill that somehow we've kind of fallen away from a little bit? So speak to that. Speak to just kind of the health benefits of friendship and connections. And what do you see from a mental standpoint? How does that help people?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
one of the things I would borrow a little bit is from the 12-step program, like the AA program.
Oh, okay.
One of the fringe benefits I've noticed for people that participate in that is that they just don't feel alone. And it can feel very lonely to be weird or different or have a problem or an addiction. And people will say, I go to the meeting and then I feel like I realize I'm not alone.
Oh, you're talking about the sponsor. You always got a buddy or a sponsor there at AA.
You can, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But in the room, and I've only been to a few meetings, but they they'll sit, either in a circle or kind of together, and you get to go around and just share your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to say anything, but one of the things that comes from that is that people go, oh wow, there's other normal good people who also struggle. So one of the first things that comes to my mind is health benefits, mental health benefits of connection and being part of a group is kind of just the sense that you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And loneliness, I mean, some of us, introvert, extrovert, you fall on that spectrum somewhere. And some people get their energy from being in groups, and that's okay. That's generally kind of thought of as extroversion. Introverts don't necessarily get their energy from being in a group. In fact, they'll often leave feeling kind of depleted, and then they will go recharge by reading a book or doing something, But the idea that connection actually feeds us by not feeling alone, I think you could speak to the physiological health benefits. The mental health benefits, though, is just that sense of, I'm known, and I know somebody else or some other people. I think your story with your dad really would kind of illustrate that. I'm sure over the years hunting together, they probably talked about a lot of things, and they probably knew more about each other than maybe anybody else. I remember in my first master's program, one of my mentors, and I really look up to him, and his name was Paul, and he told me that in his marriage, he had the gift of being known. And I don't think I appreciated it then. And I'm still learning about it now. But that's kind of that sense of, if you have somebody in your life that knows everything about you and still loves you, that's powerful.
That's super cool. I wanna circle back on that gift of being known and that vulnerability space and the connection that comes from that in a minute. That was beautiful. The health benefits, I think, also to friendship. I think also just creating community, and whether introverts or extroverts. My dad, huge introvert, like very much not social. He had probably agoraphobia, fear of crowds, wouldn't go to the grocery store, would not drive in the city. Like, he is just not a people guy. And that's okay. He still had a really good buddy. And I think we all need a good buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just so beautiful to see. Like, even as he was in that care center, couldn't really get up, had multiple fractures in his spine, too much pain to stand. And his buddy would go see him occasionally and check in and say hi, and they'd talk and have a smoke break together, and, just beautiful stuff. And I just think it creates that sense of community. They've done studies on like these communities and these people that live a long, long time, right? Centenarians or folks that live to be 100 or plus, in these areas. And one thing that they have in common is that they have a sense of community, a tribe, a sense of connection, of deliberate, very, very consistent connections.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a part of our equation with our overall health and wellness is having those people or one person who we just deliberately, intentionally, consistently connect with.
So valuable. And while it's not, it's not an academic thing, but if you think about friendship like an investment, the times that somebody has invested in me, and I've noticed in myself, my natural reaction is to want to return that favor or return that gift. Now you have to have some things in common and kind of align along like ideology and what you believe and values and things like that, and interests and hobbies. But when you find somebody that really reaches and wants that connection and invests in you, many times the natural response is, oh, here, let me return that. And that actually can begin to build that friendship. Again, going back to your dad and his friend, we can only guess, but how many times did they clean a deer together? And it probably didn't matter who got the deer. They both helped, or, you go out and you catch fish and one guy gets 5 and the other guy gets 0, right? You got skunked for the day. Pretty sure they probably split them up.
Yep.
Heading home.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really matter that day who, so those investments, if you want to think about it like that, again, I don't mean to make it like, an accounting thing, but quite literally, if you want a better connection with somebody, try to find out what they like and what they need. I've heard, it said like the golden rule is do unto others as you would have done unto you. But what if my wife likes Mexican food and I like Italian food? Well, if I give her Italian food because it's what I like, it might not hit the spot. So the silver rule is actually better for friendship. And the silver rule is do unto others as they would have done unto them.
I love that.
Right?
That's super smart. And I think you're so right in that space of helping them and loving them, and they will reciprocate. And if you're thinking selflessly in a relationship, how can I meet their needs? How can I help them? Reciprocation does happen. We've all been around those people who are like just takers. They're just take and take and take. And that's hard, man. It's like soul crushing a little bit. You're like, ooh, okay, man, I can deal with that for a while. But then eventually, like, you got to give me something, right? It's okay.
Yeah.
And even if it's a smile or like a, hey, how you doing? Like, and so I love that. I think this takes me to a good segue of how do we be good friends, right? And so what I'm hearing here is be a giver. Be a giver. Be someone who looks after the needs of those around you. One who can just drop it and say, you know what? I'm going to come over and help you with that thing I can see you're working on or whatever. That sounds really, really cool. Whether it's emotional, physical, whatever, be a giver. Go forth and give, and then things will come back. I'd like to talk about just basic fundamentals of friendship. So like, sounds really, really straightforward. You had a thought, go.
Yeah. Before we jump, definitely be a giver. Also, don't be a scorekeeper.
Yeah, that was what I was
Right.
going to say. So
You were heading there?
Well, because I think there are some pitfalls to I give, and they never give me back, and I'm expecting because I gave something back. And so that's the scorekeeper mentality, and that can be really tough.
It's a balance, right? If you're in what some people would call like a black hole friendship, where you feel like you're always giving, but there's no reciprocation, generally those kind of run their course.
Right.
You wake up one day and you go, you know what? I think this is all kind of a one-way thing.
Yeah.
It's a little more tricky, like in a marriage where you're in a committed relationship and you're not going to just walk away. So that's maybe a podcast for a different day about how do you have that conversation that says, hey, here's the things I'm trying to do for you. And I see some of the things you're trying to do for me. Help me know what you're doing so that I can be aware, and help me know better how to give to you so that it actually works for you.
Cool.
Because I don't want to give A when you need B.
Yeah. That's cool.
So
and that's a very cool way for you to also express what you need as well, and say, hey, this is what I need too.
Yeah.
That's really sweet. I love it. Back to just fundamentals 101, friendship 101. What do you think are like the basics of friendship?
So here's the funny thing. Back in, I think, the 70s or 80s, they tried to do some research around how to form friendships. And most of the guesswork at the time kind of went like this. Oh, you go up to somebody, you say, hi, my name's Timmy, want to play on the playground.
That's what worked for me back in the days.
And it turns out that friendship doesn't usually form that way. Believe it or not, a lot of male friendships form out of utility. Hey, I need your help. Oh, I want to build a fort. Oh, I want to build a fort too. Okay, your dad's got a hammer. Okay, my dad's got nails. Where can we get some plywood? You know, and suddenly you're off to the races. And because of this common goal, common interest, and utility, you become friends along the way, which is kind of cool. Women, it turns out, are much more naturally geared toward friendship. It doesn't make one of us right and one of us wrong, but John Gottman, who's kind of the world's leading researcher on marriage, would say, without picking favorites, he just says women are more naturally wired for relationships. It's just something they do more intuitively, more naturally. And so we can learn from that. But so how do they form? Well, a lot of times it really is just a common interest or a common goal, and asking for help or offering help at the right time. It seems like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but when somebody comes up and says, oh, hey, you're it looks like you need some help. My kind of natural response to that is, I don't know if I want to be put in that category by you. You know what I mean?
Right.
But if you come up and say, hey, Mark, you're good at these following things. Could you help me? Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
Here I am to help.
Oh, cool.
Generally speaking, that's how people, people want to help.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of the friendship 101 skills too, is like, even just like shaking hands with somebody, making eye contact, smiling, not just once though. That's the trick, right? I have a good friend who we developed a good friendship over the past probably 1.5 years, 2 years. And it's funny that you mentioned the utilitarian thing, because it started out like I just needed something. And I knew he had a wood shop and I needed to make a cut on a piece of wood. And I called him up, and I didn't even really know him very well. And he's like, yeah, come on over. So I came over and we talked. And that's where I was just like, shake his hand, say hi, eye contact, how you doing? Tell me about you and your family. Oh, cool, you got a kid, cool. Okay, tell your wife. Wow, that's really cool. And just take interest in them and listen and understand and hear their journey. The comment you made about having been, what was it? The
gift of being known.
The gift of being known. I think as we take time to hear people's stories, hear their life's journey, we are knowing them. We're giving them that gift of being known, albeit to a smaller degree initially. As our friendship became more and more deepened, I knew him more and more, and I asked more questions. I got to know him more, and we're just good buds now. And we both work on wood projects together. And if he needs help clean his yard, I drive by and I'll go help him. And there's a lot of helping going on with our friendship, and it's great. But there's also a lot of knowing going on through questions and taking interest and connecting that way. And so I think that's really cool, the gift of being known and applying that principle to someone else. And as we're actively engaged in, creating friendships, and it doesn't have to be like exorbitant, right? Maybe we're not hyper extroverted. I would say in these spaces, probably quality is way better than quantity. If you have 3 really good friends, like, you're winning, right? You don't need 20 really shallow friends that don't really connect with you much at all. In fact, half of them really don't. And so I think that's for me, I think that's some of the fundamentals that I've noticed. And interestingly, like I trained in med school and residency in the South. And in the South, there are like social graces that are really beautiful. And they make eye contact, they shake hands, they call you sir, and they say their name, and they connect very deliberately. And it's really kind of cool. And then they'll just jaw. And I'd never heard about this until going in the South, and they'll just sit there and talk. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're just moving your mouth. I'm like, you're not saying anything, but you got a sweet accent, so I'll keep listening. And it's beautiful, actually. I just love the culture. Here, it's interesting. I would say hi to someone, and hi, I'm John Sanders, and how you doing? And they're like, great. Well, it's nice to meet you. It's nice to meet you too.
And you are?
And I don't even know your name, and so I'd have to like say, hey, well, tell me your name.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Gene, nice to meet you. Yeah. Well, tell me about you, right? Like, then I'm trying to play this tug of war of like, hey, can we know each other, right? That gift of being known, and I think that's the challenge, is like, how do we give someone that gift of being known and know them, and that's part of it.
You know, I as I'm listening to you, my mind is churning, and I'm thinking of things like authenticity and vulnerability. You know, and there's a time and a place, right? We have to be selective about that. Not everybody deserves my, kind of my private self,
Yeah.
right? Like if it's just a surface relationship, hey, you're selling me a car, I'm selling you a car. We can chat, we can be friendly, but it's more of a transaction, and I don't know if I'm even going to see you again. Now, on the other hand, I've got a good friend, and we've had several conversations about his childhood and growing up. He was terribly abused, and this is one of the people that I honor, and I honor him because of what he has overcome. And it's kind of that thing, like combat veterans kind of have this. It's like he knows that I know that he knows that I know.
Yep.
And I've also shared some of my growing up stories and experiences and struggles and weaknesses. I really like, they used to have a kids talk show, a little game show kind of thing, and it said, kids say the darndest things. And I remember this little boy, and I think the question was something like, how do you know when somebody loves you? And this little boy, 5 or 6 years old, just in the wisdom of a child, the innocence of a child, said, you know someone loves you when your name is safe in their mouth. And I might say to that, you know somebody's a true friend when your story is safe in their mouth.
That's really cool. Brene Brown, great author of The Power of Vulnerability, speaks to some of these topics in what she talks about, and I just love her content. I think it speaks to the power of vulnerability and helping us overcome some of those obstacles towards connecting and developing good, loving friendships and stuff.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Just being vulnerable, being willing to be vulnerable, and then protecting that vulnerability as the listener is what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's because it's risky. Let's face it. If I share something with you, well, I have shared, outside of settings like this, but, just person to person. And I remember one time you said to me, hey, thank you for sharing that with me, and I could tell that it was almost like, when somebody, it's almost like you hold a basket out and somebody places something in the basket, and you kind of hold it and honor it, and you say, oh, hey, look, you just set this thing in my basket. I see it. It looks like this. You described it like this. Okay, yeah, hey, that's now safe with me. Thanks for sharing. And that's when your relationship deepens. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, and this is part of being careful, sometimes you take a chance and you share with somebody and they go, oh, I don't know, me. And you go, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your life, Mr. Me Monster. And I get it. It's all about you, or maybe you're just having an off day. But I'm not going to continue to try to place things in that basket, hoping that you're going to recognize or honor them or treat them with care, because for whatever reason you can't. And so we're probably not, this thing, it's not going to deepen, it's not going to go anywhere, and we're probably not going to be friends. We might be acquaintances. I'll remember your name, but I'm not going to call you at 2 a.m. when I have a problem.
I think I love that you said that and shared that, and I just thought about it. Sometimes our vocations shape who we are as people, and as a family doctor, people share lots of vulnerability with me, and it is my job to be very confidential about it all, but also to really cherish it. I mean, those are pearls. They're sweet pearls that are given to me in what I would consider a sacred space. I think those spaces of communication, of friendship, of trust, are very, very vulnerable and very, very important to really appreciate. And really,
Okay, I got to ask you though,
mm-hmm.
because that's one of the things I love about your practice, right? So, and this is not like, for those of you out there listening, this is not me attempting an infomercial here, right? Like, how have you preserved that? Because one of the complaints that I hear from people that go to see their medical provider of whatever flavor is like, oh, I felt like sheep, cattle being run through the, and how have you maintained that personal human touch with people's sensitive information, sensitive experiences, when you could very easily just be like, oh, here we go again?
Mm-hmm. That's a hard one, Mark. I think over time, it's very tempting to just plug into the very broken system that we have, and even take the knowledge that you gain and be a little prideful about it and be like, I know stuff and you just listen to me and you do what I say. And this is, and I don't have the time to actually hear you and actually listen to your story and actually connect to that and cherish that trust and that vulnerability you just shared with me. I'm just going to give you what you need to understand to get better, which is science. And I think it comes from like our learning. Everything that we do is so left-brained, right? It's so science. And then we can become these kind of jerks, right? That are like, okay, yeah, I've seen this 1,000 times. I know exactly what's going on with you. Yeah. I've listened to you for this much time, and I'm 95% sure this is what's going on. Here's what you need to do, and here's how you fix it, and I'll see you later next. And I don't think any doctor goes into becoming a physician with that intent. They don't. They are whipped in that direction by a very broken healthcare system that's fraught with inefficiencies, bureaucratic box-checking bullcrap. I call it the triple Bs.
Wait. Do that for me. Bureaucratic
box-checking bullcrap.
Bullcrap.
Because we are strapped to this computer checking boxes that have nothing to do with taking care of people. It's all bureaucracy. It's all, in order to get paid by this other person, you got to check these boxes and make sure this and this and this. So it's just silliness. And it's fatiguing and demoralizing. And
to you or to them or both?
Both.
Yeah.
I'm having to, my attention.
You don't feel good.
My attention and intention and friendship and love and care. We can't say friendship or love in medicine, unfortunately, but I do. But my care is directed away from you, and it's in these other directions. And so I don't think it's the intention of these doctors. It's just, unfortunately, the system. They do care about people. They do. I was there. I practiced in it for a while. I get it.
Yeah.
Changing my model and recalibrating to my why very strongly, which is being able to spend the time to really connect and really understand and really hear, was the answer for me. And so I changed the model. I just do a membership model, and now I can spend 30 to 60 minutes with my clients. Yeah. And I love it. They love it. Everybody loves it. It's reasonably affordable for most people. And we win. Everybody wins. And I really enjoy the connection that I share with my people. But I always have. Even in residency, when I left the South, in residency, it's the system. It's rapid fire. It's quick. It's all those things. But I still love my people. I love them. And when I left, I remember flying to my next job in Moab, Utah, rural medicine, from Jacksonville, Florida. And I remember just briefly taking note of all the people that I had the privilege to care for there in Florida. And I just wept. And I thought, not going to get to see these people anymore. And they're people that I just love. I just love them. One gal, this sweet black lady, delivered 2 of her babies in my 3-year residency program. She's very religious, and she always did on makeup and put on a hat. She's so sweet. And she's like, hey, Dr. Sanders. And we just had a great relationship. And every time she had a baby, she would say the same thing. Well, both times. She had like 8 kids, and I think I delivered 7 and 8. And she's so sweet. She says, "Ooh, Dr. Sanders, ooh, this one's this is a heavy, ooh, baby's coming. Baby's coming." And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am, okay, I'm just right here." And then the contraction would be gone, and then she'd just talk, and we'd be talking just pleasant, blah, blah, pleasantries. And then the next one, she's like, "Ooh, Dr. Sanders, ooh, oh, Lord Jesus." And then the baby would come. Both times she said the same phrase, the same way. It was just beautiful. And I don't know, those kinds of experiences, they enrich my life. I love it. I'm there in that. I mean, delivering babies is the moment of moments, right? It is the deepest of connecting and all the things. And Dad's there, and it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. So I don't know. I just cherish those relationships, and I think a lot of doctors do. I think they're just strapped to a very broken system that kind of unfortunately jades them and whips them away from that, and it's a bummer. It's a bum deal.
I remember being told, 'cause, my history was spent about 15 years as a counselor, and you hear a lot of people's struggles and problems and private information, and I remember being told at one point, be careful not to become cynical or callous. And there is that temptation to be like, oh, I've heard this before. And the value in stopping and saying, this, maybe I've heard this before, but this is their first time saying it to me. And so I need to treat it like it's the first time hearing it, because for them,
It is.
it is. And back to friendship, because we're kind of bouncing a little bit in and out of the professional, space a little too with some of what we're talking about. But even on an interpersonal level with the friends that I have in my life, I've tried to grant that same courtesy. If it's kind of like there's this rule, it's like, hey, if you feel like it's important enough to say, I should probably feel like it's important enough to listen to. To a point. I mean, and we all know those people that they'll tell you their whole life story and they don't have a filter, and that's kind of different. We deal with those people as courteously as we can and as patiently as we can, but it's not really interpersonal, because they would tell anybody. They would dump out their laundry basket in front of anyone and go through their underwear. They don't really care. They just don't have that. But when somebody's telling you something that's private, that's personal, that's valuable, that's meaningful, and you say, okay, I need to match that. I need to honor that. I need to be in that same space if this is going to be good. And people know it, and I would go back to, my experience first coming to you because you're my doctor. And I was actually kind of like, I didn't feel intimidated. I didn't feel talked down to. I felt spoken to, but we were just talking, and you're like, when's the last time you had a good thorough exam? I'm like, I don't know if I ever have. And you're like, oh, there's this fact, by the way, just letting you know, that spot on my arm you wanted to watch, we might have to check on.
We'll check it.
Yeah. And you're like, we need to watch that spot. And you like went through my scalp and you were checking for any, like, I'm guessing like skin cancer risk type stuff. But I just, and we're talking the whole time, you're looking me over, and I thought, this is the strangest, coolest thing I've ever had happen in a doctor's office, because I just feel like I'm with a friend that's taking care of me with the skill set he's got.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been any different if you were a mechanic and I brought my car to you and you were talking through what you're doing as you're tuning up my car.
Yeah.
And I was like, I feel really comfortable here. Like, I just feel like this is, I don't feel talked down to. I feel like I could say whatever I need to say and you would have listened. So, again, we're kind of bouncing in the professional and interpersonal space a little bit, but some of the people listening, hopefully, have professions of their own. And if we want to just put in a plug for a minute in that space, it's like, hey, I don't care if you're an accountant, are you an attorney, are you in the medical field yourself, or maybe you're the mechanic we were talking about. That sweet little lady that brings her car in, and she hears a ticking noise, and she's really, really concerned because she needs to go on a trip next week to see her sister. And if you just treat her like she's a dumb, not knowing, and you're the mechanic, and go sit over there, and I know what to do, just shut up. I mean, that's going to, but instead if a person says, oh, you're going to see your sister? Oh, that's great. Older sister, young? Oh, your older sister. Cool. Well, let's get this car in good shape so you can make the trip.
Even as a parent, we could get cynical. Like I've heard that so many times from my other kids, but for that kid, it's the first time. And so I love what you're saying, and the application to us as individuals, and then as parents, and as just people, and taking the time to hear and connect to what they're saying. I think that's beautiful. Those are beautiful tips. Not long ago, I listened to Huberman Labs podcast. Andrew Huberman, he's like med school professor, he's a smart dude, and I like how nerdy.
It's like your favorite podcast.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So he did one on focus and productivity, and he talked about neuromapping, and his host, gosh dang it, I forget his name, but he's brilliant. He's a PhD tech guy, and he talked about how some of the tech industry is causing some neuromapping to mimic ADHD. And so it's resculpting brains to become attention deficit. And in my practice, I see it all the time. I see, this very superficial connection, and then on to the next thing, and then the next thing. Mm-hmm. And folks think, man, I got good grades in high school and in school, and I did fine. But now, man, I can't focus to save my life. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a learned, and they talked about it as like a learned programmed behavior that is changeable and sculptable and can be fixed, actually, as opposed to truly diagnosed ADHD and all those other things that are not along those lines. I wonder if this principle applies to kind of what we're talking about, where perhaps there's some learned behaviors that are like detrimental to developing friendships. And I see I have almost all teenagers. My son finally turned 20 and started thanking me for things, which is kind of cool. I'm like, oh, it turns out.
That's an interesting day, isn't it?
Yeah. But my teenagers, I try to keep them as very limited and restricted away from some of these damaging processes, but it's impossible. Mm-hmm. So one of them is like, doing Snap and doing, some of the social media spaces. And she's in college, and she has a lot of Snap friends. And I watched her scroll through all of her Snap people, and she'll just snap them a funny face or snap them a funny angle and snap them all these things. And I'm like, honey, what's the point here? Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, these are all my friends. I'm like, well, are they though? Like, mm-hmm. and I think there's so much superficiality in the connections that we're laying down. Our young people now, I think the landscape is different, and they're being trained and neuroprogrammed to establish friendships in a certain way that might be damaging long term and maybe not so helpful short term. Can you speak to that space briefly? Totally.
Yeah, it's concerning, and I think, to be fair, it's happening to all of us to some degree. And what we're talking about mostly is a phone, right? Electronics. And when I was growing up, and this will date me a little bit, and we had a telephone on the wall with a cord, and you answered the phone, and if it was for your brother or your sister who wasn't there, you took a message, on the notepad, and when they came back from whatever they were doing, you said, hey, your friend called, and you passed on the message.
You're so old.
I know, huh?
I used to do the same thing. It's fine.
Yeah. And if you really were good, you could huck the phone at one of your siblings, Boom!
Remember the long cord? It was like it reached through hallways into another room. Yeah, that was sweet.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you don't know what we're talking about, it was coiled up. And if you stretched it, it would coil weird, and you had to get really good at reversing the coils so it would lay right. Well, and in those days, you met somebody, you looked them in the eye, hopefully, you shook their hand, you gave them your name, they gave you their name. You know, there was this understanding that this is like how you do the thing called meeting somebody, and connection was usually a phone call or in person. And then, you know, technology advances, some of which is good, but today I think the pendulum has swung to the point where, you know, you've probably seen two teenagers sitting on the same bench, literally hip to hip, touching each other. I mean, like, you know, sitting so close they're touching, and they're texting each other, because that's the cognitive map they've developed for connection. It's like, oh, that person in their mind, like if you could open up their head and say, oh, here's your friend, you know, Mike. I want to tell Mike something. That pathway, that neural pathway literally goes through the phone, through his phone, and out to Mike. Like that's kind of how the map might look if you were to try to draw it out. And it's frustrating. We can't be too hard on our kiddos because it's what they've known, and it's the culture that they live in. But here's something kind of interesting. I was in a church meeting, a large church meeting, and the leader got up and he did something very bold. And he was actually speaking to the adult women in the congregation, and he said, ladies, if you're on social media, he mentioned Facebook, which was really big at the time and probably still is, I guess. But he said, you don't have 2,000 friends. You just don't. He said, if you haven't met them in person, you need to be careful, because, and what some would describe as a false intimacy, meaning, you know, the connection side. Some people say intimacy and it's code for sexual intimacy. I don't mean it that way. There's a lot of different types of intimacy: physical, intellectual, sexual, spiritual, you know, whatever. But there's this false sense of being known because you have all these, quote, friends. Snap, same kind of thing. And I have the same question. I'm like, wait, what is that? What are you doing? Oh, you do a snap every hour or something. Or you do a snap every day. And I'm like, why? Well, you just do it. Well, you don't have 2,000 friends.
Fraudulent friendship, fraudulent connection, fraudulent intimacy.
Yeah.
Dangerous. It's counterfeit.
Yeah.
It's dangerous for our folks. And so I don't know, the on this podcast, the tech guy, gosh, I wish I remember his name. I'm remiss, and I will put it in the show notes. I'm sorry. But he said, I don't let my kids on social media. They don't go there. And he's like a PhD at a well-known university in California in tech. And he knows how demoralizing, fatiguing, and damaging it is.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Zuckerberg say he wouldn't let his kids go on Facebook?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that, but probably.
I think he did. I'm like 95% on that.
Yeah.
Because you remember there was recently this revelation that they were creating their platform to be addictive, and they knew that it was damaging. I believe some state attorney generals have kind of formed a case.
Again, on this podcast, the tech guy, he speaks specifically to the very sophisticated people that they have employed to create very addictive platforms in both social media, gaming, all of those spaces.
Yeah.
And you know, you're part of a guild on a game who's got a whole bunch of members and all these people, and you might even talk, but it's fraud, right? It's not real.
Yeah.
So taking the time, I think, to turn all that off and make sure that your connections with those, especially in your immediate surrounding, like maybe your family, maybe your wife, maybe your kids, you know, make eye contact, like touch hands, say hi, and connect, and show them what that is about. We are in a world where they didn't have what we had, right? And our kids, they didn't have the no technology-ish era, right? Where we grew up. It was like, we don't have cell phones, right? We don't have any of that stuff. And it's okay to we had to like make effort to go. I used to run. I live very rural in Nevada. My good friend's name was Lupe. He was from Mexico. And I used to run 3 miles. Oh, was it 3? It was at least 3 miles through the desert, sagebrush. There were no roads, and I would just make a straight line. I knew he lived in that direction, and I would just start running, and I would go visit him.
Yeah.
And his mom would make me tamales, and we would eat and we'd talk, and it was super fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of effort in that friendship, and we hung out all the time. We went to quinceañeras and weddings and dances and all kinds of, we ate lots of spicy popcorn.
Mm.
And so, I want that for my kids, and I think it's to us to kind of keep teaching them those spaces of connection and intimacy and friendship. Can we speak to that briefly, the connection and intimacy space?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned you kind of pulled them apart just a little bit, but can you speak to your thoughts on connection and intimacy and what they are, kind of define those, and then how we might be able to be better connectors or better
Definitely.
at intimacy?
Definitely. First thing I would say is, for me, intimacy means into me see. And I haven't ever heard it said that way other places, but that's how I say it. And when I let you see into me, and going back to what we talked about a few minutes ago about the basket, and if you treat it well, that becomes the glue that connects us. So into me see. Now, different relationships warrant different types of intimacy. So some relationships, it's appropriate that there is sexual intimacy. Some relationships, physical intimacy, just a touch, a hug, a handshake. Intellectual intimacy, maybe this is colleagues or other people who know about the kinds of things that you like to think about. Spiritual intimacy, people at your church, other people who share your beliefs. There's a lot of different ways that I can let somebody see into me or into me see. And when they do, or when they let me see into them, and I treat what they showed me with care and respect, our glue or our bond increases. Unfortunately, and it's, sometimes the case, as we talked about earlier too, if I let somebody see into me and they don't treat it very well, then it does not create a bond or a glue, and it probably creates a little bit of distance or hesitance to do that again with that person. So you want to be careful. You mentioned pearls, and maybe the reason that some of your patients share with you so much is there's an assumption that you care about them. They came to you to get care. In fact, you call it direct primary care. So that's kind of my first thought on the notion of connection and intimacy. The other thing that really makes intimacy powerful, or the into me see, is to be comfortable in that space with other people, whether it's their personal space or my personal space. So what does that look like? Oh, my dog died. Oh yeah, things die all the time. Instant shutdown, right? That one's over. Oh, my dog died. Oh, what? Your dog died? Yeah. Okay. Are you doing all right? Well, I had him for a long time. He was kind of my buddy. Oh, what was his name? Oh, we called him Scooby. It was really funny, after the show, Scooby-Doo. Yeah, I remember that. Huh. And how long ago did this happen? Oh, he died last week. Huh. How you doing? That's a question we're afraid of, because I don't know what he's going to say. How are you doing? Oh, I'm not doing well. Do I have to fix it now? No. One of my friends, I really liked how he would do this. He would say, how you doing? Oh, great. No. How are you doing? And then he would listen and usually get some little snippet from their life. And he would say, well, I just want you to know I love you. I'll be thinking about you.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
It's like, don't be afraid of the answer. Most life problems can't be fixed, especially by other people. And most of us aren't looking to have our problems fixed by somebody else. What we want is to be known.
To be known.
Yeah.
Are there pitfalls to friendship, to intimacy, to connection? What might those pitfalls look like? I can think of one just offhand, and I am guilty of this, and I've fixed it to a pretty strong degree. One pitfall is just insincerity, and insincere can be I'm jaded, I'm burnt out. It can be I'm sarcastic because I'm jaded and burnt out. Sarcasm, any form of insincerity kills connection. It kills friendship. It kills. We think it's funny. We think it's this or that, and it's not. It's none of those things. One of my favorite traits that my father had was sincerity. He would always talk to you, and he'd always tell you, and you knew exactly where he was at emotionally. Sarcasm and insincerity create a slippery slope for those around them, because they're like, there's a slippery landscape here emotionally. Is dad mad? Is he happy? Is he upset? What's going on in that head of his? I don't know. I'm scared, right?
Yeah.
And so I was guilty of that for some time, and I deliberately recognized it, and I told all my kids, and they said, "That we like you joking," and I said, "No, it's not it. I don't feel it. It's not the way. It's not it." And so they said, "Okay, well, whatever." And it took me like 18 months to finally correct that. And now I still work at it, but most of the time my discussions with my kids are very deliberate, and they can be lighthearted and smiley, but most of the time they're very sincere and very know how you're really doing, right? And I think that's one of my pitfalls that I had to overcome. Any others that you can think of like, you know?
Well, first I would say good for you. That's really cool, you know, and ain't none of us perfect, right? And just catching that, and I think it's okay to have fun. It just not at somebody's expense, because that's what sarcasm usually is, right? Sarcasm is actually usually funny because it has an element of truth, right? Oh, that's the nicest dress you've ever worn. Oh, I was just joking. In fact, if you want to watch a movie that really does well at this, is it's the Tangled movie, the Disney movie, Rapunzel story. First time I watched it with my little girls, they were young at the time, and I was just like, so we played a game, and I said, because Mother Gothine in the story, she's very insincere, very selfish, very evil in that sense. Oh, look in the mirror. What do you see? I see a beautiful woman. Oh, and then I see you too. Ha, ha, ha. Just kidding. You know I love you. So I'm like, I got it. So we played a game with my girls. I said, let's watch this, and let's try to figure out when Mother Gothine is lying. And they started figuring it out. They're like, she's lying. She doesn't really love Rapunzel. It's all about her kind of stuff. So kudos to you. And I don't think you were that way, by the way. I guess I don't know. But
I was. No, just kidding.
Father Gothine. So cool. Other cancers to friendship, I would say just selfishness in general, which we're all a little inclined to do. You know, when all my needs are met and I got money in the bank and it's easier to be a good friend. But what happens when you get that call and you don't have a lot of money in the bank and you've got a busy schedule the next day? You don't really want to be going out at midnight or 1 o'clock to pick somebody up, or whatever the story might be. But you make the sacrifice. Why? Because that's what you do when you're a friend. And back to scorekeeping. So I would say selfishness and scorekeeping. And scorekeeping is just a subset of selfishness, really.
Yeah.
You know, I did 3 nice things for you. Where's my ice cream?
Right. Totally.
It's like, oh, okay. I see how it is. So, you know, there's probably others, but those are kind of the big ones that come to mind. And really being aware that, well, I would also say that forgiveness or lack thereof, you know, the positive and the negative. So people are going to make mistakes. You know, what happens when I start to tell one of my good friends a story and they go, oh, hey, I got to go. And I start to be like, ooh, that wasn't what I expected from my close friend. And then later you find out, oh, their dog just got out the front door and they had to hurry to go get it. So you kind of want to reserve judgment and leave room for forgiveness. You know, hey, sorry, I did that wrong. I shouldn't have. That was a terrible time to have to run. Yeah, it's cool. You know, I had to do that once before. Remember? Oh yeah, you did. All right, quit being a jerk. Okay, great.
I love it. Thanks, Mark. Those are great tips and tricks and little pitfalls to kind of avoid as we're striving to develop friendship and have sincere, deliberate connections with those around us. I think I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on closing tips and tricks here. So we talked about friendship, the art of friendship, how to the importance of it in our lives and health and wellness. What are some ways that we can do, maybe 3 things that we can consistently do in our lives to continue to connect and develop with maybe, immediately with spouses or loved ones or family members or even somebody outside of your circle of people?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing that comes to my mind is you've got to make the time for it. It's not going to happen on accident. So the people you care about, the people you love, the people that you want to deepen a relationship with or deepen a connection with, make time for it. Make it a deliberate effort. And, we're all busy and whatever, like, that's fine. But I heard somebody say to me one time, referring to parenting, he said, I learned as a young father, my kids would wait and my wife would wait and they would wait and they would wait. And then one day they were gone. They'd grown up, they'd left the house. And I missed all of those wonderful moments because I was busy doing other things. Mm. Now, I get it. I'm a provider. It's really hard to both make sure your family's needs are met and give them all the time that you would like to. I don't have a magic button for that. But what I've learned is my kids will wait. And I feel a little hypocritical saying that because sometimes they've had to, because I'm busy doing whatever. But I can say that the times that I have made time for my family or my friends, I've never been sorry for it. And if I made something else wait, I can't tell you what that something else is now. At the time, it seemed really important. So I'd say be deliberate, make time, and just be gracious. Everybody has their off days. And try to be as patient with your friends as you hope that they would be with you. And the last thing I would say is to judge people on their intent, or try to. Mm. We all have different ways of doing things. And if somebody's trying to help you, even if it isn't exactly the way you prefer, look at the intent and be gracious for the offer, for the gift.
You helped me so much with the situation I had with my wife not too far back.
Yeah.
We both had a different way of parenting. Then I was like, this is the right way. And you said, well, John, what's her intention? And I thought that was brilliant. And it made me pause, recognize she's not a bad person. Neither am I. We both have really good intentions. Let's get on the same team here and let's work this out. And so I love that piece. If I can add just in closing, I thank you for your tips and tricks. I thank you for your wisdom and your experience in this space. You can tell that you have done a lot of good for a lot of people in this space of connecting and friendships. My last thought as you were speaking, it just came to me, and that was just unconditional. I think we see a lot of folks love conditionally and connect conditionally. And, I grew up in a very, super imperfect family. And it's okay. It's okay. And I love very deliberately and connect very deliberately with all of my people. And it's been a gift for me because now I can sit next to somebody with a cigarette in their hand and just, it's no big deal for me, or a beer or anything. And I think that if we can get rid of the conditions that we put on our friendships, there are lots and lots of pearls out there that we're missing. We're just missing some really cool people that could share some really cool things with us and connect with us in really cool ways if we just strip back some of those paradigms of conditions that we sometimes put on it.
I would endorse what you're saying with a little bit of a spiritual / religious perspective. And that as I read the New Testament, Jesus spent his time with kind of the social rejects, right? The sinners, the lepers, the people who struggled. And when somebody challenged him on that, he said, "They that are whole need no physician." And what I've learned is, ain't none of us whole.
Yeah.
Ain't none of us. And I'm not perfect at this. I was raised in a home that, I thought after you met somebody and they walked away, I thought the next thing you were supposed to do is judge them and point out their weaknesses and faults. That's kind of how it happened. I didn't know that wasn't a good way to live. And it took a lot of work to not just not do that, but think differently about it. And I've tried to get to the point now where when I meet somebody, and I have a little different lens that I view life through now because of my training, and people will sometimes say, "Oh, you're probably diagnosing me," and I joke and I say, "Oh no, I diagnosed you a long time ago. You're just as crazy as me." But the truth is, to start seeing the beauty in other people, like my wife's really good at this, like naturally. She's one of the kindest people I know. And she just sees the good in people. And she's not dumb. It's not like she doesn't see the other stuff. It's just not the focus. It's not the point. And I love that. And I love hearing you kind of talk along those lines too. And that's one of the things I like about you. So keep up the good work.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, thanks so much. What a great podcast. Thank you. I hope this brought some really good insights to y'all. See the good, be the good, go out and love and connect with those around you. Let's be good friends. I think it's really healthy for our communities and for us as individuals. Let's keep moving forward. Like and subscribe, Voyage Clinics Podcast. Thanks for listening.